Hello, welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. It is Monday night. You will probably watching this on Tuesday, but I appreciate everyone for tuning in. We have a very special guest here. We're doing our off-season program. We have already gone over the quarterbacks for 2022, the running backs for 2022, and then tonight we will be going over the wide receivers for 2022 with Nick Whalen. Nick, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. I just hope people know that me and you are sacrificing not watching the national championship game to get them this pod. So, you told me that. I'm like, no, it's fine because this is fun for me and I can always watch that game, but I'm gonna have to shut off Twitter. You know what I mean? I have to watch it,
Yeah,
before I do
my
that.
phone is face down right now. I don't really want to know anything that's going on. We'll catch the second half though, and hopefully it'll be a good one. But yeah, so you have been in the biz for a long time in many ways. You're a coach on the field, but also have been evaluating players. You've been doing things for fantasy at DLF Dynasty League Football. I write there as well. Done stuff with Matt Waldman from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, which is one of the first things that I actually invested in when I started getting into Dynasty. It was great. It's a great product. Dynasty Nerds, Dynasty Trade Calculator. I mean, just all over the place. So you are a seasoned veteran in this, and I am kind of a noob, and I am really, really flattered that you wanted to come on and chat about some wide receivers. So appreciate it. It's
No,
gonna
no,
be, it's gonna be fun.
no, we had said this before the air, but no, you had talked about your stats background a little bit, and no, I'm excited, man, because this is fun. This is the first time I've talked about this class on a pod, and we have a couple questions here, and this is the part that kind of gets me because it gets me thinking about topics that I haven't thought about in a little while, and that's always fun. I like to be stimulated up here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's going to be a good time. These are I really wanted to find, and I'm glad you could do it specifically because I had people in mind that I wanted who know X's and O's, who know, the game beyond fantasy, beyond stats and stuff, but like how the mechanics of the game can work. Because my questions, we're talking about wide receivers, so we're going to perform this podcast from the slot, if you will, and talk a little bit about through your eyes, with your experiences, how has the slot wide receiver position, changed probably over maybe the last decade in terms of talent, the players who are being put in the slot, the schemes of the offense to maybe, I think, highlight this position and become more of a focus. So, like, what have you seen happen there?
Well, just to make this really personal, so let's see, 2020, there wasn't a whole lot of football for high school because I coached there now. In 2019, so it would have been the last year we had. The year before that, 2018, was my last year as coordinator. And I almost primarily highlighted slots and made it advantageous for them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And you want to look at, you said the last decade things have changed. And, who kind of highlighted that the most is, I would say, New England with Welker and the two tight ends, and then it was Edelman, and and then it's kind of the everyone else from there. But it's I think it's, you can get these big players and win there, like Marcus Colston and the Saints used to do, or you can get these athletic tight ends, and then it's like, okay, a safety might be close to their size, but they're not maybe as athletic as Gronk, who's crazy in the slot. Or, we see Waller now and we see Kelsey now, or it's these, I said big receivers too, but then you have like these guys that they're just so quick, no one can stay with them. And then you could have these great route runners. So like really it's a combination of, a guy that could be a mismatch in there. And why is the slot better than the outside is because of many reasons. One, it's space. You have more space to work with. And then when within the scheme of a defense, that slot position, all corners can't go in there because it's different. Being a corner, I think, is the second hardest job on the field. The first is a quarterback, but second is because a corner is all reactionary. And they have to react to whatever the receiver goes and stops. They have to stop, and then they have to go again. So they have to be really quick. So normally they're a little bit smaller, but it's hard. It's hard because you see Devontae Adams and Keenan Allen, who are awesome in the slot, and they'll stem one way, or they'll have an option route, or they'll hesitate, and then they'll be wide open. You're like, man, that DB is hard. It's hard to react and then beat a reaction. You know what I mean? You have to be like twice as athletic to kind of get there. And so space is part of it. So then they have more space to operate. They have a sideline on both sides, you know, one way or the other. And while they can get bracketed, so bracketed would be you're kind of guarded by two guys, by maybe a linebacker and then a safety deep or one inside outside, you can still manipulate that a little bit, which is nice. But then the other thing is distance. It's a shorter pass. They're not going all the way to the outside or outside the numbers or, you know, to the field side, which is the wide side of the field. It's right here, you know, so you only have to get a little bit of space and boom, you know, if it's on time. And also you can hide deficiencies in there. Let's say you're not good at press releases or you stack two receivers. So really the NFL has just evolved with, oh man, this is a nice little chess piece in here that there's not many answers to. And you want to watch some of these great guys like Adams. Adams is almost primarily in the slot now, and it's good luck if you can guard him. And he had one of the best seasons ever from a wide receiver. So really in terms of the NFL, I think they realized that, hey, the slot is where it's at right now. And good luck trying to figure it out. And then if you pay too much attention there, then some other guy's going to be wide open because all of a sudden, like three guys are focused on Adams, like the Bears, my Bears did. And then all of a sudden, a no-name tight end's open in the end zone.
Yeah, and honestly, and you know, if you think about it too, if you're going to focus that much attention, and like you said, it's the slot, so it's kind of middle of the field. You've then got a sinkhole in the middle of the field, and you've then got two things on the outside, maybe man coverage or whatever, that you can exploit. So it seems to me to be really problematic to suck multiple defenders into the middle rather than if you could like spread your guys out, you know. So obviously anytime you can pull an extra guy in one way or another, it's going to be advantageous. But, you know, it's and by definition, I would imagine most of my listeners know this, but you know, the definition of slot means you are a wide receiver covered by an outside receiver, and you have to play off the line, right? I think you have to, or not necessarily. You're just covered.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
if the outside guy, if there's, you know, a split end or a flanker, they can go off the line and you can go on the line. So you can adjust that a little bit. And honestly, you would do that based on matchup. If you're like, hey, this linebacker can't press me anyway, or they're terrible at it, maybe you want him to press because if they do that, there's a couple of advantages to that. You probably have a point here, but I'm just going to go way technical. But is the purpose of press coverage obviously is to hinder the receiver. So if you're a good receiver at press breaking, you want to obviously make him miss, but not go wide. You know what I mean? Like if you do math, right? You know, if you go way out here to go around this guy, that's a lot of time and space to do that. You want to do it the most efficient way possible. And if the guy's bad at doing presses at all in terms of a defender, then if you're like, hey, yep, I want this linebacker to come up here, maybe you want to go on the line so you get your route quicker. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit of a time and space thing too, but most of the time they're off the line.
Yeah, sure. And so that's why people say, oh, the receiver struggles with press, we'll put him in the slot. I guess that's why, generally speaking, people say things like that. But I think it's interesting. You know, you brought up a couple of times, and it's funny, like, why did the NFL take this long? But who knows why? Probably multiple reasons. But they realize this mismatch is a huge advantage. And you know, for our game, for fantasy football, I think it's taken people a little bit longer too to realize, you know, slot for so long, right? Oh, he's just a slot guy. Like it was a negative. It was a limited player who would get limited use. And so I think it was a negative. And now you're talking Devontae Adams, clearly, I mean, for fantasy, the best. Well, Stephon Diggs, but anyway, easily one of the very, 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 very best receivers, playing a lot in the slot and getting fed targets. Putting up monster numbers. Like this isn't a guy who we think of a slot guy. Oh, he's going to go like 6 for 58 and maybe get a touchdown. No, like is a feature player in an offense. So I think, you know, that's changed not only on the field, but also, you know, in the stat sheet, which, you know, gives us our fantasy points. So it's something to really consider. And, you know, I'm going to bring it up later when the whole point of all this was to talk about these prospects. Because now we can get information that says these guys are playing in the slot in college. And what is that going to mean for us? Or should we be scared away? Because I feel like 5 years ago, people would have been like, nah, I don't want him. He's not the Alpha X. We don't need the Alpha X maybe anymore. So it's kind of an interesting thing that does play into, I think, fantasy points as well. And so we kind of talked about this a little bit I think, but more specifically, maybe what qualities, I guess, if you're evaluating a prospect, because we're going to get to these college guys, what things about a guy would make you say he's a slot, or at the next level he will be a slot player, and how does that work into how you may evaluate a guy at the NFL level?
Mhm. I'm going to say one that I think a lot of people don't highlight is in terms of a positive, like this guy is a slot that he'll be good there. Will be he's a quick decision maker. You're a quick processor because when you're in the slot, you have to pre-snap, post-snap, a couple steps into your route, figure out man, zone, what coverage is there, because a lot of things in the slot are option routes where you have to settle down. You're going to run it out. You're going to run it in. You're going to just sit down in the hitch. You're going to do these crossing routes, and then you either have to when they run crossing routes, you're not constantly just looking at the quarterback. That's not what you do. You're running. You're looking at the defense, and then you settle down where it's open. And that's a timing thing, but you have to look at the coverage, be like, oh, he's out there in a zone. I'm going to sit here instead of run right into him and get, drilled. So if you can process, what the defense is doing quicker than other guys, you're going to get a job in the NFL. That's something that, Larry Fitzgerald is still a slot receiver. I think he just retired, but he was productive, not based on athleticism. He lost that because he knew where to go and he was smart about using his space. Jason Witten was like
Dad
wonky.
runner.
Yeah, dad runner. But he was good with his routes and knew how to identify things, So that's something. But I think in terms of like the negative part of it would be a guy that can't get off of press coverage to save his life. So you're hiding him off the line. And why that makes that difficult too is if there's more space between, like if you're right here, it's easier to press a receiver. But then if you have 2 yards, now they have more space to kind of come at you. Because the worst thing that can happen in press releases is for receiver to stop your feet and a defender to get into your body. Well, if you have this much space, it's easier to get into your body and there's less, space kind of, or you're stopping your feet. But if you have momentum, your feet are still going to probably keep moving. So that's kind of why that helps. Undersized, which would lead to less physical, which make it harder, to break a press release. And then guys that I think are quicker than fast, where, that quickness can be more utilized in these little movements, especially in and out of breaks versus on the outside where you're going to have to get more or utilize more space, eat a defender's cushion and then, settle down. And those guys are pretty athletic out there and they're longer, so they can't be as good out there.
Yeah, and traditionally we do think of, your depth of target's going to be longer for kind of that alpha X, or the outside guy is going to go downfield and things like that. And I think the classic example, or I don't know if it's pre-air now at this point or not, but the Wes Welkers of the world who defined this slot role for a while ago with New England, but he probably didn't. He's not going to beat you on an 88-yard down the sideline, go route, but eats up space and just chunk gains. But I think it's just real interesting that we're just seeing volume at the slot position more than probably we ever have. And like you said, I mean, people are realizing this is a mismatch, and defenses, I think, have. I mean, I hear so much about now people like drafting nickel corners that, maybe even early than they used to. And again, that used to be the kind of the mirror image of the slot receiver where it was a negative. Oh, he's just a nickel, so he's only going to come in on nickel packages. But now, like, 3 receivers is almost base for a lot of teams, and nickel D is almost base for a lot of teams. So it's kind of a completely new role for both sides of the ball. And now having a great nickel corner is, slot corner or whatever is actually a defensive advantage. So, and you're seeing guys getting, I think, traded, being more popular in free agency that can play that slot role that used to maybe be afterthought. So,
I mean, like you said, 11 personnel, 10 personnel, when running backs can line up in the slot or on the outside, your Danny Woodheads, but then eventually your Ecklers, and then your Kevin Falk a long time ago, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, that's why they're, more valued right now, because it's the same thing. It doesn't matter as a slot receiver. It's using that mismatch, but then you see all these safeties that are getting drafted higher and higher, because that's a hard job, because you have to be good in run support, cover and space deep if it's too deep, if it's cover 4, it's cover 1, cover 3, but then also match up on a tight end or maybe a running back. Like that's a tough job for safeties nowadays because these mismatches. And it's like, well, if you're good and you could do a lot of that stuff, you're going to be a high pick or get paid.
Yeah, and I mean, the offenses are forcing defenses to be multiple. You can't just play kind of a static position anymore, I think. And like you said, you need, I mean, as much hybrid on actually both sides of the ball is good now too. So you can always hide what you're doing pre-snap, and then obviously you're doing a lot of different things with the same guys instead of always subbing in a new guy for a new package. If everyone can look the same all the time before the ball is snapped, but you can do infinite things, that's probably number one thing you want to do. So, I think safety, honestly, I mean, you got quarterback, I think maybe elite pass rusher, and then safety might be, or boundary corner, I guess, if you could shut down a whole side of the field. But I talk about this with my friends all the time. Like, okay, quarterback, number one. But after that, what's the most important position on the field? And like elite safety might be pretty close. I mean,
look at
control the whole field. Yeah.
Tyrann Mathieu made a living not because I don't think he's the best free safety in the NFL, but because he can match up and do so many things for your defense. Earl Thomas, before he, I don't know, went crazy or whatever happened there, was great because he could do so many things where he was physical, but also play free. And, it's the NFL. I mean, the next thing I think that's going to happen, honestly, is what you're seeing a little bit with Derrick Henry is I think the NFL's like, hey, all of these defenses are super light and super fast, and now we're just going to pound it down their throats and see if they can tackle people. And as you can see, I mean, they shut down Henry, but man, it took a long time for someone to finally do it.
2 years.
And that's, and that's all too. I mean, it's always like, okay, what's the advantage? And that could be the next advantage because now teams aren't big enough to stop the run consistently.
I feel like New England maybe tried that this year. It didn't quite work, but I think they said, I mean, they basically ran like power option, like Cam was a fullback almost, and, just tried to run and beat people with physicality, and they just couldn't quite do it because you still need some threat through the air, I think, and Cam was just not. But so I think, the next question I had, we've kind of already talked about it, but the slot discussion is very interesting to me. And I think Fitzgerald, you mentioned, was one of the first guys to be kind of like a big slot that had a huge success recently. Colston before that, though, he was a tight end, in kind of designated tight end. And then,
leagues.
Oh yeah, baby. I had that. I was still a new fantasy player, and I still was like, wait a minute, he's going to play wide receiver and he's listed as tight end. That has to be good. And I remember I had him on my team that freshman or rookie year. But and then more recently we've got like Juju kind of is that big slot, and Tyler Boyd, and you're just seeing like really, really fantasy relevant players in this slot. And this idea of a jumbo slot is very cool to me too. These bigger guys, not these tiny fast guys, but like 6'5", 220 in the slot, and tight ends. I mean, one of the biggest things now I look for is kind of like, what is the tight end slot snap rate? I mean, I want guys who are playing in the slot, number one, because they're getting probably pass routes, but I don't care about inline blocker for fantasy. I just want to know how much in the slot are they playing. And so that's a big, big thing too. So I think it's still, I mean, a lot of people have figured it out, but I still think mining the slot is a big advantage for, I think, a lot of, fantasy points that might be a little, uncovered at this moment. So,
but I also think, I mean, when you want to look into college, if a guy plays, exclusively in the slot or primarily in the slot, it's almost a negative for me because I want versatile guys, because it's not always going to be 10 personnel, 11 personnel. There's not always going to be a slot. And so if you can't play on the outside at all, that limits your snaps. And so I want guys that can play both, and at least show me that you can do slot stuff, if that makes sense. Like to me, people, when I first did my Devy report, I'm kind of known for Corey Davis, and Corey did line up all over the field at Western Michigan. And that's something I love to see. Now, it doesn't mean that you're, elite here and then you have to be elite here. I just want to know that you can do it. So then NFL teams are like, oh, hey, he's not coming off the field. You're on the field. You get more targets.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one reason why I love punt returners, because you get on the field and things like that. Anytime you can get on the field and show off, then you can buy more snaps, basically. So totally agree with that. So yeah, I've got my top 10 receivers. We're going through this 2022 class, and this is presumed 2022 class, as I've been saying. I mean, assuming that these really, really good sophomores who will be juniors will then declare, that may not all happen. And then some guys who will be going to be fourth years, presuming they will declare next year. So a little bit's projection there. It's my top 10 receivers. We may not be equal, but I want to run through them and get your pluses and minuses. And then I've also added on here, with the theme of the show, the slot percentage. So, PFF does track slot in college. I think you might be able to get it at RotoWire, but there's limited places you can even know, unless you literally are watching every single game, which, I mean, who's doing that? Where you can get slot rates for college. So you can kind of assume watching a little games, but to really know. So I've charted that for us so we can chat about that too. Cause I do think, I fell in love with Eli Moore this year.
Oh,
yep. And I think he's so good, but I was a little bit like, man, what do I do? Like, I love the guy. Mm-hmm. What do I do with the fact he was like 90% in the slot? And I think at the end of the year, he started playing a little more outside, but like, for last year and this year, so much, like you said, so much slot. Is that a problem? But we'll talk about these guys, and I agree with you. I'd like to see a little of both. I think exclusively slot is bad. Maybe, I guess we'll see. When you transition to the NFL, coaches can maybe decide to do different things with you too. But
one thing just to note on. So when you're talking slot for college, there's other things to think. Just keep in mind.
Oh, this is good. I want to know all this stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, you want to think of the scheme. Is this scheme conducive or highlight slot players? If it doesn't, then maybe he's outside because that's where the majority of the balls are going to go. If he's always in the slot and he's really good there, maybe the quarterback doesn't have the arm or confidence to throw to the outside consistently. And then also you have to think about depth chart, because we talked about this before the show. What makes it so hard to do college players that are more than a year out is their bodies are always changing, but we don't know in terms of, and I've been there, who the favorites are on the team, who the offensive coordinator really likes. This quarterback passing game coordinator really likes this guy. He's a captain. Like, all this stuff like matters. You get on the field, maybe that's why this guy's in the slot and not on the outside. There's so many things to kind of keep in mind that makes it different than the pro game, because the pro game is about results, and all of the quarterbacks have the arm to throw to the outside.
That's that's a great point. And even doing some of my, DFS research and stuff this year for college, realizing teams like Mississippi State, this air raid, they just pound the slot. They just, like, all of their good receivers are like 90% in the slot, because they're probably running 4 wide. They have 2 slot guys then, I guess, right? So, and they just only throw into the slot. The outside guys actually were getting hardly any targets. They just must be decoys or however the offense works. I'm not an air raid expert, but I was surprised to see that. I was actually surprised to see that. All slot targets.
Sorry, yeah. And what's interesting, a long time ago, when in your boy, because you're a Florida guy, Spurrier, they ran tons of hitch routes, which would be more conducive, I think, to those slot guys too. So this has kind of always been, you don't go before that. You had the run and shoot, which, is a little, it's a lot of short option routes that are more conducive to these quick guys in the slot.
I like the idea about these option routes and having, I like you framed it as potentially a positive, quick decision making, ability to read a defense man versus zone real quickly and get to your right spot. So it may not be a negative anyway. So very interesting. Let's get into the actual players. I know that's what everybody wants. Everyone likes a good list. So for me, we've got these 2022 guys. There's 3 pretty consensus top 3 receivers. I think I have added a 4th into my tier 1 at the moment. But starting with, I've got Garrett Wilson. He's playing right now. I wonder if he's caught a touchdown, but we'll have to wait and see. I really like what I saw from him this year. Kind of commanding a huge share of the work for Ohio State, despite Chris Olave being there, who's very, very good in his own right. But a year younger, played mostly in the slot, 70%. And Olave, almost all outside. I think he was under 10% designated in the slot. And so maybe it was something like that where they just wanted to get them both on the field. One thing I love about Wilson, is his post catch. He's so dangerous post catch, and the things I've seen with him catching the ball and then he can absolutely make someone miss. Seems to do a lot of yak with just very, very sudden after the catch, and I've really been impressed with that. Don't think he's number one for you, but I know you like him. He's like top 3 for you as well.
Yeah, yeah, I like Garrett Wilson. He's not number one for me. And we talked about this off air, but so this is the coach in me. I'm going to talk about a lot of negative stuff. Now, again, Garrett Wilson, I think, is like my second or third receiver in this class. And I'm going to say all this stuff, and you're like, man, this guy doesn't like him at all. I do like him. Okay. So there's a couple of issues where I see him wasting steps and emotion with identifying zone or man, which is something that you really need in the slot. So wasted steps is time, and time is really crucial. When that ball's in the air.
Yeah, you're talking about 2 seconds to get the pass off. You can't waste a half of that.
Yep, exactly. And part of this too is when they're running those routes, so if you're this is your defender's, feet or frame, he has to attack certain parts of that frame to get him to move a little bit, and to increase the area he's trying to go into. And I don't think Wilson does a great job of that, or at least consistently. So that's one thing he needs to work on. He's played on the outside some. I think he needs work decelerating. So that would be coming under balance. That would be how to slow down, but still look like you're going to go vertical to increase separation and eat up that cushion, make him turn his hips. I don't see that. I see him slipping some or not coming out on balance to be. Maybe he'll catch it, but he won't be on his feet, or he won't be able to make a football move afterwards. I think he's a good athlete. I don't see an elite athlete there. I've always wanted to see a little bit more burst, a little bit more speed out of his game. I mean, again, that means he's more of like a Christian Kirk type athlete to me than some elite athletes. So it doesn't mean he's a bad athlete. Okay.
Yeah. We can just say from now on, any negative means they're still the top 0.1% probably of football players in the world, but where we're trying to differentiate between the top 0.1 and the top 0.05%, we have to use language, and for lack of a better term, they're not as good at certain things. So all you listeners out there, we don't think these players are bad.
Right. I think he needs to vary up his releases a little bit more, and the more that you have in your toolbox, you can use when you're presented with new problems. So I think he needs to vary those up a little bit more. I don't think he plays as strong in traffic. I think he has strong hands so he can catch in traffic. But when I say strong in traffic, you're talking about yak. He can be good there because he's athletic laterally, and he can find that space. But it takes a different mindset to be aggressive and run in traffic and know you're going to get hit. And like Tyreek Hill trusts his speed, and he'll go hard sometimes in traffic, not all the time, and he'll get through there. Percy Harvin, your boy in Florida, right? He was not afraid of contact, and he would split guys or break tackles because he was aggressive. Garrett Wilson is not. And so I think he needs, and that reduces yards, that reduces points, which is kind of what we're looking for. So yeah, I think he's I have him as between a Christian Kirk to probably a poor Odell Beckham Jr. That's what their game looks like to me on the field.
Okay. I mean, that's awesome stuff. I could listen to just someone break that kind of stuff down all day, because that's eyesight. I don't have that. I mean, I can look at a guy, but I can't tease out some of those things. So, I mean, that's really cool to hear. Everyone listening, you're lucky that we got this guy on. So, I mean, that's great. I think what you're saying about, Tyreek Hill, and I've heard some other people talk about him recently. I think there's maybe some guys on the Crocker Report talking about how he's obviously so fast, if not the fastest, but also controlled, which is amazing, right? So, I mean, to have that velocity, but be able to harness it completely. And when you watch him, it looks that way. He actually always seems very, very in control. And, it shows up in, like you said, wasted movement. There is none. Every single step matters. And he can make, it's not even about cuts. It's just every step is strong. It's a strong step. It doesn't look like shaky or too much juking. It's just decisive every single spot. And so, that should be our bar, I guess. So Garrett Wilson, a slightly short of the best player in the NFL. Doesn't mean he's bad. Okay, so then number 2, I've got David Bell. He is a big-bodied receiver. When you watch him on film, he definitely does not look like an elite athlete, in my opinion, in terms of just overall speed and things like that. But he has obviously commanded a ton of targets since stepping on field at Purdue, which you love to see. I mean, as a true freshman, he had, I believe, is over 30% of the market share. And then again, this year, he had pretty close to that. Even when Rondale Moore came back, he still was very, very involved. Different player, obviously, than Rondale Moore, so that you could definitely feed him both. Bigger dude, I think 6'2"-ish, 210, 215 kind of guy, and almost always outside guy. I think about 9% in the slot. And when you watch him, when I watch him, I would say he looks like, he just gets open and he makes really good catches. He uses his body pretty well, but I don't see a whole lot of like wow athleticism after the catch. He gets what he needs to get, and he would need to be a very high volume, reliable type receiver for fantasy purposes, but I don't see the humongous play or just the special athleticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm with you. My comp for him, and again, this is going to make people go like, ew, because it's not sexy, as I'll call it, is he's like between like an Allen Hurns and a Tyler Boyd. And the guy that's consistent, where he's going to be. People forget Allen Hurns was pretty good early in his career in Jacksonville.
He was.
But nothing about their games, is going to be like, wow. But he wins on the field with technique, toughness, and effort. That's how he wins on the field. I mean, you talked about his body. I think he can bulk up a little bit. He could put a little more muscle on that frame. But what I like about him, and the reason that he succeeds, and the guy that on his team is probably more athletic doesn't succeed, and I'm a huge Rondale Moore fan. He's my number one over him. That's not what I'm saying. Would be because he's purposeful with his movements. So when I talked about attacking defenders and their leverage and settling down in zones, and when he has crossing routes, he comes flat, because if you drift up the field, guys can undercut that. He comes flat. Like, he's just smart. He knows, where to control his body to box out a defender to make it open for his quarterback. You look at Plummer, the guys that are throwing him the football, they trust him because they know he's going to do all of the right things, and it's not going to result in interceptions for them. They're like, I can do this 50-50 ball, because it's not 50-50. This is going to be like an 80-20 ball going to Bell and in contested area, and he's going to come down with it. Strong hands, which I like. He puts an effort as a blocker, which I like. That means he's a team guy. I've told this story before, but I've talked with their wide receiver and passing game coordinator 2 years ago, after Rondale Moore's freshman year. And he told me stories about Rondale Moore, but I know from him how well they're coached. And now you already have a progression. You have a Rondale Moore that busted out there. You have a David Bell that came out there. That's something to think about. I mean, that's for Purdue. I mean, how many wide receivers have we been talking about? Now we have 2. So I think all of the technical sound stuff is there. So I said blocking, but even after the reception, he still tries. He's not going to be amazing. He breaks some because it's college football, but he's going to get you some, kind of like a Tyler Boyd, like, he got me some. He's not going to be great, but yeah, he's probably like I would call him an above average NFL athlete. Not great. He'll be, I said Allen Hurns to Tyler Boyd, but think about like his ceiling would be like Boyd or like a Robert Woods type.
And the thing is, like, that's still great. I love Robert Woods, so I mean, it's definitely not a knock. But and in any given rookie class, if you get Robert Woods, I mean, you're happy as a fantasy manager. So I think that take I feel actually great, because that everything you said very similar to what I think I saw. So I feel that's kind of reinforcing. I did him right, I guess. One thing I really like about Bell, and you definitely touched on this, and this bringing in a little analytics here to the film discussion we're having, but big on breakout age. Okay, does a guy get on campus and dominate at 18, dominate at 19? And I think some people who aren't big in analytics or like to make fun of analytic-minded people are like, who cares when he does it? As long as he does it, as long as he puts it on film at some point, he can do it. And, there's some merit to that. But when you're doing things like what you're talking about, earning the trust of a quarterback, doing the right things, the little things, the boxing out, putting your body in the right way. These are all nuances to the position that is not a 40 time, right? These are things that like the flipping Nike Spark camp is not telling us if he can do these things. So you step on campus, and all of a sudden you've got obviously a good athlete. He was a 4-star recruit. I mean, he was not a nobody. But then to me, getting on field and commanding these targets immediately says, I can do all the little things. I know the nuances. I know, at a young age, doing it against 20-year-olds. So to me, breakout age is not just a nerdy analytical thing that we like to throw around. It says this guy can do all these little things, and he's a good athlete because he's a D1 football player. But he's advanced in how he plays the game, and it shows up in the fact that he broke out early. But it's like a surrogate for telling me that these guys are advanced, and it may be athletically advanced, but it may be just technique advanced and small things. So just a little plug. That's how I think about breakout age. It's not just, oh, he's too old. It's showing this advanced stuff at an early age. So then when he goes to the NFL and he's not the oldest guy on the field, he's not the most physically mature guy on the field, he's already shown he can do this when he steps on campus and is going against 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. So that's why I like it. That's why I bake it in. I mean, there's data that shows it's important for projecting guys, to be fantasy stars or whatever. But like, to me, understanding like, why would that matter helps me. And you said it all. I mean, David Bell's doing all this and putting this on tape for us at 18, 19 years old. And I think that makes you special, probably.
And I mean, you talked about, I mean, sometimes their bodies change and things like that, but you look at, what people don't know is like, okay, Rondell Moore's there, probably got a few other guys. D1 programs have like 15 receivers. They got guys there that have been there redshirt senior. They've been there 5 years. Maybe they got an injury. They got granted a 6th year eligible. I mean, there's guys that are there for a long time that know offenses or know how to be a college player, and he's beating them out. That's what makes it impressive. I mean, Moore went down with that injury, and he was the guy that stepped up. I'm like, what's that? It was shocking to me, and that they continually kept going to him with targets really speaks volumes of, I would say, knowing the playbook, knowing where to be. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you bring up like that grizzled college vet. I think Rick Wells for Florida has been there, I swear to God, since 2013 or something like that. And he just, because everyone has to announce this year because even guys without eligibility can go back, right? Because of COVID. So like he announced he's coming back to Florida. I mean, the guy's like never done anything. He's going to be like 27 or something like that.
You know who's been in college? I literally just thought of it this week. Is Demetrius Robertson. I feel like he's been in school forever. I mean, he started at Cal, number one athlete. He's so athletic at Cal, transfers. He's just been around like
forever.
How old is he? How many years can he be here?
I live in Atlanta. I was watching the Georgia game with my buddy when they were on their bowl game. And literally, Robertson caught a ball and I turned to him and I was like, dude, he's been there for 10 years. Like, what the heck? I feel the same exact way because I remember he was like a 5-star dude, but it was forever ago.
You're in Atlanta and you're a Florida fan?
Well, I'm born in Atlanta, actually, but raised in Florida like my whole life and then moved back.
Okay.
So yeah, parents both alumni. So I just kind of was born and bred. All right. So speaking of Georgia being in Atlanta, of course I can't walk down the street without hearing about George Pickens. I've got him as my 3. Pretty sure he's higher for you, and I can absolutely be convinced because the reason he's at 3 for me is certainly not highlight film because he flashes truly elite stuff. I mean, truly amazing plays. The catch in the bowl game is pretty much all you have to see, that fully extended diving. My concern is a little bit the opposite of what we've seen with David Bell, right? So he is a stud athlete and he's been on Georgia and he kind of commanded 20% last year. That's kind of a mark we like to see as a freshman. That's great. But then this year he didn't take a step. And I know the offense was trashy and we have a lot of quarterback issues and things like that. Maybe you can elaborate on Stetson Bennett and his limitations for half the year. But I guess my concern is like he's supposed to be this humongous stud and he flashes stud things, obviously. But I was concerned that like Burton kind of was almost neck and neck with him for a while, true freshman, even when JT came in and elevated that offense. So I think he
Jackson was okay
flashes.
too.
Say what?
Jackson was okay too.
Right. Yeah. Karis Jackson was actually their leading receiver, for the whole season, if you put it all together. So I think he's great. I guess I'd like to see him just kind of take that alpha role if we're going to project him into the NFL to be like that X stud that we think he can be. He's another one, no real slot stuff, 8% in the slot from what I can see. So, but a big guy and seems to have just tremendous body control. Everything you want except for seeming to command all the targets. So take it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like all of the things. I mean, yeah, that catch was amazing. Watching the highlights and stuff. But as a coach and film guy, I guess I'll call myself. What I love about Pickens is at the line of scrimmage, and that's where my comp for him is Keenan Allen. I see Keenan Allen all over his game, and his feet at the line of scrimmage. I mean, you could even mix in Devontae Adams if you wanted to.
Ooh.
His feet at the line of scrimmage are great, and I'm one of those people that I don't say great or elite. I don't say it often.
Well, you're a coach. You can't, right?
No.
You always have to say what you're bad at.
Right. Yeah. But part of it too for me is that I think we overly say GOAT, great, elite.
Yeah.
It's
Guilty.
like,
as well.
Troy Aikman, this guy's the best player in the NFL. No, this guy's the best player. Like, Troy, you said that last week. Like, how many guys are the best player? You know what I mean? Like, I limit it, but he has great feet at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he sets up winning routes at the line of scrimmage. I mean, do not do press coverage to him. I mean, you're not going to win. It varies up his releases. And so what I mean by that is, you have to, no matter what, if you are lined up, I wish I had a board here, but like, if you're lined up and your defender is going to take over the inside, so take over the half of your inside to take away the slant route, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make him think you're going to still go inside on him to open up his hips or to make him hesitate. And then that gives you a better release. Okay. Because if you just go outside, he's going to go outside, boom, he got you. So he varies up his release as well. Because you can go and Doug Baldwin talked about this, where it's almost like doing a crossover in basketball, where you set up one way and go the other way, but sometimes you fake go and then go back. And they have all these varied releases that they do, and it's fun to watch. But that's where he does great work. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's got 2 yards. Boom, and I don't think he's a great athlete. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's probably a 4-5 type of guy, which is good enough.
Yeah.
But he's smooth. He runs good routes, shows body control. He's a confident player, which that's part of this too. Talk about going into traffic. He'll sacrifice his body, obviously fully extended to catch a ball. Wide catch radius. He'll even go to the turf to get a ball, which that matters to me. That shows that balance. You're talking about every step. You have to be on balance to be able to get that football too. One thing that I mean, he's okay after the reception. I don't think he's great. I think he's okay. Sometimes players try to do too much, just get what you can. An issue that I have with him is he's confident. He plays with this chip on his shoulder. He's tough, but he's also emotional and can get too emotional and get flagged. And that's, as we saw from my Bears, Anthony Miller, CJ Johnson.
Showdown.
CJ Johnson is owning Bears receivers this year with getting flags, for no reason. So, you have to harness it. You can Steve Smith it and make it, your shtick or your whatever carries you, but you got to harness it. And he needs to do that too. But he has the highest ceiling in this class. And I would argue the highest floor too. Bell would be there as well. But I mean, I struggle to see a guy that runs this good of routes this early in his career and not be successful. I mean, I saw it from Keenan Allen at Cal, and then he hurt his knee a little bit. People forgot about him, but it's just phenomenal.
Well, and then Keenan ran like a 4.6 and all the, I mean, that's the one thing I will say I've learned with, analytics is I do not care at all about a 40 time, especially for a wide receiver. So, but he fell. Yeah. People were like, oh, he's slow, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, so for me, just a quick on that one. So I care about the combine like 5%. And it's because, and that's if you just test out just poorly. It's like, well, were you hurt and or you just like
Mhm.
not that athletic? You go back to the film and you watch. But because as you talked about before, with those purposeful movements and Tyreek using all of that speed, it's what you use on the field, which takes a mentality. If you're fast and track, but can't be fast on the field, Demetrius Robertson, we're talking to you. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, absolutely. You got to convert that to meaningful plays. And frankly, we mentioned not great athlete, right? But like, you tell me, Devontae Adams, and DeAndre Hopkins for that matter, I don't think of them as like the elite athlete. I mean, Tyreek Hill is everything, elite athlete, production, the whole nine. Adams and Hopkins win in other ways. They are not testing warriors.
Robinson.
But you don't have to be. Yeah, you don't have to be. So anyway, that's an aside. But I don't care. Like 4.5 is great. In fact, 4.5, even 4.6, I'm not that worried about it. So how many times are you starting with your hand on the ground, on the NFL field? So,
Good point.
so I've got a guy at 4, and maybe it's a little homerism, not because I like the team, but because I kind of feel like I was one of the first guys to identify that he could break out in summer of last year before this year, when now I think most Devy players are very well versed in who Treylon Burks is, Arkansas receiver. Just setting the stage, he was a true freshman and he was like 6'3", 225, walking on campus as an 18-year-old, immediately was the leading receiver as a freshman. He returned punts as a freshman. He saw attempts on the ground, like through the running game, jet sweeps, things like that as a freshman. So the coaching staff identified this guy immediately and said, we have got to feature him, which says a lot to me. And that especially at that size. So he's doing all this dynamic stuff at 6'2" or 6'2" or 3, 225. So I really liked him. And then this year he blew up as a sophomore, by far and away the most dynamic player on the Arkansas offense. And so I really like him. I was surprised actually to see 80% of slot snaps for him, which I didn't think of him as a slot guy, but I guess Arkansas, the offense seemed to, use that a lot to get him the ball. When you watch some highlights, it's very easy to see he'll line up in the backfield, like straight up in the backfield, and then run routes out of there. Take some handoffs, jet sweeps. He just does so much stuff. But I will say I'm a little nervous having him this high, not seeing a ton of kind of one-on-one outside matchups where he's winning, off the line, things like that. So what have you seen from Burks? I feel like he's still maybe a little bit not unknown, but like, I don't think I probably have him higher than a lot of people. I really like what I saw this year.
Yeah, and you could call me against him. I mean, last year in my Devy report, I had 12 receivers in this class I made profiles on, and then he's in my like others to consider along with Trey Knox on his own team. So, you could say, hey, I have stuff against him, but this is the stuff that I like. You'd like to see guys that progress. And I think he progressed, which was nice. I think he progressed athletically, if I'm being honest. And that's the best part about this. Was it the body? Was it confidence? Was it technique? Who knows what it was. But he's a big boy that moves like how big boys should move on the field. Like, it's like weird, you're like, what? It gives me a little bit, and I hate this because when you do comps, a lot of times it's the number can mess with you. You can look at a guy's number and be like, it's a little Cortland Sutton for me, which I was a big Sutton fan, but 6'3", 220, 6'3", 225, 230, whatever you want to call Burks. But he's got really good, I think, burst and even lateral movement for a guy his size.
Yeah,
athletic.
Smooth for his size for sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what his up the field speed is though. I don't see him running or maybe trusting his speed in a straight line a lot. Now, again, that's not everything, as we talked about, especially when you're bigger, you can use your body more. But I don't see consistent effort on routes. I don't see him running purposefully in terms of one of the issues, and Garrett Wilson does this. One of the issues is, on paper, hey, run this route, slanter, you want to do a circus route or whatever it is. They run the route, but like there's defenders on there too. Like you want to run and like influence and stuff. I feel like Burks just like runs the route,
Mhm.
and eventually you have to learn that it's an art form. You're an actor out there and you want to sell this starring role that you're this one guy, and then you take your mask off and you're this completely other person, and you're going to be wide open, and that's what I don't see him doing as much. Not that he doesn't ever do it, but I don't see this consistent guy. And I don't. It's Arkansas. They were a mess. I mean, Felipe Franks. Ooh, like it's just not good. And in a way, when I was watching, well, I'll go back to that in a second. Not consistent effort, not great with the routes. I would say he's aggressive after the reception. I feel like there's more there that that he could do with. And when you think of the athleticism, I feel like there could be another step to his game there. But in terms of just feeling bad for him, I kind of went back a long time, and you're going to remember this being there in Atlanta. I kind of got the vibe of like Demaryius Thomas. Like you got this like great guy in this whatever offense at Georgia Tech, and
Was
you're
he
like,
was Thomas with Ball, or I think
yes,
Calvin was with Ball, or
those
was
are
it
Ball.
Thomas? Okay.
Or
Yeah.
no, hold on.
Might have been Calvin was with
Calvin was
Ball.
Ball. Yeah. But I mean, Thomas was just not util. I mean, they utilized Calvin.
Yes.
Thomas, they didn't. It was just like, hey, this guy's athletic, and we'll see. And then everyone just assumed Stephen Hill was going to be Thomas and Calvin, and he wasn't. But
Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
you can see Thomas had more things to his game that they didn't utilize, and they're giving Burks the ball sometimes in not advantageous positions. And it's like, well, how's he supposed to win with that? I mean, you get this guy, and we talked about in the slot, put him one-on-one with the safety and dare them to guard that big body, that athleticism, and teach him, to stem at the top of his route and lean one way and go the other way. Like that would make it more effective for the whole offense, but they're not there yet. Maybe this year will be the year, because I think he needs to learn to be more of a receiver if he wants to play in the NFL, and not be this almost like a Trey Burton role in college. You talk about Florida there, where he's like this, like just like this back sometimes, and like, man, what's he doing?
Yeah, I have to say, I was really excited about Treylon, and then kind of following along during the season, and he was putting up major numbers, and he was very fun play on the DFS slates and whatnot. But when I went back and actually watched some of the tape, I was actually the way they use him was really just like a tremendous athlete. But like you're saying, I didn't see a lot of at least evidence of a technical wide receiver doing weird stuff where I like it, but I also don't like it. I like that they want to force feed him the ball, from the backfield, things like that. But like he'd motion into the backfield and then take a swing pass, outside. And I'm just like, why are you using him like that? I mean, I guess you want to get him the ball in space, but I think you're, like you said, I mean, Arkansas is a little bit of a mess. Felipe Frank stinks. I can say that because he was a Gator. But yeah, so I mean, I definitely think I have him that high because at that point in my rankings, I see a ceiling. Cortland Sutton was actually a nice guy to think about, because Cortland Sutton, size, speed, freak show like Burks, but maybe a little raw, but you can envision this ideal pie in the sky. And I think that's where Burks is for me. And I'll concede, I don't think he's like right now a great wide receiver. He's more of just a jumbo athlete that can dominate in college. And we'll see, but I see a ceiling here, and that's why he's this high for me, because I want to shoot for the moon. So,
that's definitely a low floor, high ceiling play,
right.
And but honestly, when you're in that spot in a Devy draft, in a, projecting this far out, you have to shoot a little bit for ceiling. And that's the thing. Like I don't know how long that you've been following me or my work, but like my first guy was Corey Davis, and my next one was Cortland Sutton, and people are like, you're dumb. They're like not mid majors, and I'm like, I like their game, and they hit. Now again, I have tons of others that didn't hit, but like I just saw this ceiling that was there, and the footwork and the well-rounded games for both of them, and I don't see it there for Burks yet. But again, he's at a bigger program. So we'll just see how he evolves. And that's the exciting thing. That's, if there is spring games, you could see maybe some of that there and practices, and then
Yeah,
hopefully
like you
next
said, I mean, this is 2022 class. We still have a whole year of college football minimum for these guys. Then we've got, evaluation, NFL, buzz, draft, everything. We're way out ahead, and it's still fun to have these lists, but like, yeah, I'm sitting here saying my top 10 right now, but this is fluid. I mean, I do the rankings for DLF as well, and they want us to update twice a month. So we're talking every 2 weeks. You're adjusting, you're changing stuff. I mean, this isn't static, which I will say is one thing for the Devy community in general. And I know all of us are, this is all a labor of love for us, but and who has time to do so much updating, but when you can Google a Devy list, but it hasn't been updated since August, that's not helpful. I mean, these are not set in stone rankings. I mean, these have to be changing pretty frequently, and so they will change. But right now, I have Burks there because I like that ceiling. And updating a previous item, the quarterback you were looking for is Josh Nesbitt for Georgia Tech,
right,
who completed 46% of his passes that year, and over half of them, I mean, you're talking about a dominator rating or a market share. Demaryius Thomas caught 46 of his 75 completions for 1,100 yards, and Nesbitt threw for 1,700. So we're talking about like a 60% market share. Like, it's just, they're running the ball or throwing it to DT. That's it.
But imagine a receiver with 1,100 yards, and he only got 70 targets.
And they knew it. They knew, like, this is literally the only guy we have to worry about on the entire field through the air. And you had to imagine they were bracketing him, and he just was, obviously dominant. And I think, like you said too, we all wanted Stephen Hill to be the next, but he obviously had much more to his game than probably was utilized at Georgia Tech in the Paul Johnson triple option. So, well, in the interest of time, we probably should maybe touch less on these guys as we get down the list. But getting through the rest of the top 10, I've got Drake London, who's been a pretty big riser this year for USC. I really liked what he did, commanding targets, really leading the team in the short season in receiving yards, despite a very good Amon-Ra St. Brown and a very old Tyler Vaughn's also there. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty impressive. Like we said, he obviously shows some nuance, some route running, and some ability to get open, find the zone out of the slot. He was like a 90% slot guy. So clearly in the mold of this 6'5", 210, 215, 220, I can't remember, but something like that. Big slot, jumbo slot type guy. And he's at 5 for me in the tier below, but still pretty interesting guy, and I think we'll be excited to see next year because he should potentially be the lead dog.
Yeah, he's like an Alan Lazard to me when I see him. I mean, he's big. He's not quick twitch. If he stops his feet and tries to go again, it's not going to be great. He's smart, settles down in his zone. And again, that's the identifying. He's good at that because it's an option route. He just sits. He's a big target, presents himself big, sure-handed. He's not a ton after the reception if he has to stop his feet. Like, he just kind of is what he is to me. I probably won't own him anywhere because what's the ceiling with that? He's like a wide receiver 3 if he ends up with like an Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't see it with him. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't ever get there because, maybe he does develop more burst and more speed and stems guys at the top of routes. But right now, he's basically running 5-10 yard routes, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, that whole offense seems to be running 5-10 yard routes, unfortunately, which is a bummer because I loved Slovis and he looked like kind of crappy. And Amon-Ra didn't look, I mean, he had moments, but the whole offense did not look explosive down the field at the very least, to say that. So yeah, that's interesting. I will say, watching Drake, I don't see special twitch. I don't see, special athleticism. I agree with you. He kind of just gets there and gets the ball, and not a whole lot of excitement, except for that one play. I think he broke like 12 tackles, but even that was kind of like stumbling, rumbling, bumbling down the field. It wasn't, amazing athleticism. It was just kind of like continuing to move forward and guys just falling down.
Right. And part of it too is like on film, like, is it good play or just bad defense?
Right. And I think that was, more bad defense. So yeah, I think Drake could it's just when, we're talking about a top 10 within a class. We're not talking about top 10 overall, Devy. So at some point you just fall off in a class. So right now he's at 5. The next guy could easily leave him. The next guy could be, potentially challenge Pickens, I think, personally. I've got Jadon Hazelwood for Oklahoma next. Been injured. He's going to mess with all of our breakout ages and everything like that because his first year was behind CeeDee Lamb as a true freshman, and Rambo, who, well, that could take another episode. I don't know what happened to Rambo. He's like he's nothing. But, as a freshman and showed some promise, and then injured this year, played in a handful of games at the very end of the season. So we really only have any kind of high school stuff to look at. Now, obviously that's hard because they all look wonderful on their high school highlights. He, to me, looks just brilliant. A big, long, smooth athlete to me. He was really a big guy, but also not playing like a power forward. I saw actual like graceful movements and stuff like that. Was I seeing the right thing? What's your impression? Have you been able to watch a whole lot at all?
You're higher on Hazelwood than I am. Even high school tape or, what he showed his freshman year. And, I don't want to count a whole lot of what happened this year because when you tear your ACL in the spring, coming back from that for this season, there's only one Wes Welker, you know what I mean? Like, It's just not a normal thing. So he to remind people of a game, and again, that's why I do this, not like career arc. He's a little Sammy Watkins for me, where I think Sammy, his athleticism kind of got overrated. I think he's a good athlete. I don't think he's great. Kind of does everything solid. He's got 6'2", probably what, 6'2", 210. He's got enough quick twitch, but not crazy good, enough speed, but not, he's probably a 4.55 type of guy, maybe 4.5. He can do some things after the reception, runs under balance a lot, which we talked about is important. He's got a little bit of power, can win above the rim, but nothing is like great about his game. Everything's just like enough, which I don't know if that's going to be enough for me. So I had Theo above him, honestly, in my Devy report coming into the year.
I like Theo, and it just kind of wasn't there for me this year. It just didn't look very explosive. So he kind of fell off. He would have been up here for me too, actually, and he kind of just fell by the wayside a little bit for me.
That's a lot. And we were talking about this before we got here, but this whole class is kind of want. Like, because they all got hurt. Frank Watson.
A lot of injuries,
Joe Nagata. There's just a ton of, I mentioned Dominic Blaylock, and you're like, he tore his ACL twice. I liked him.
Know. Yeah. And I actually, off the top of my head, I was like, I don't think I know who that is. And I was like, oh yeah, Georgia, but he hasn't done anything. So I just really don't know that much. So Hazelwood, okay. Work in progress. Okay. One guy who did play, in my next, we got a tier break here, just because I see a ceiling for Hazelwood, and London has kind of done a little bit more. So that's why they're in their own little tier. But then we've got Wan'Dale Robinson, and I have here in my notes, what is he? We love to dream on these guys like Laviska Shenault, and before him, Tavon Austin, and these like hybrid running back receiver guys. Robinson, for his credit, the raw numbers were not terribly impressive, but whatever is like 700 yards, I don't know, something receiving, was actually like 35% of the Nebraska market share or something. He was like a featured receiver. He was also a kind of featured running back. So I don't know. What is he? 72% in the slot. His game looks kind of like that slotty kind of receiver. I think he's good. I just don't know what happens next.
Did he transfer to Kentucky?
He's in the portal. I heard rumors about Kentucky. So yeah, he won't be at Nebraska next year. Maybe it will be Kentucky. Definitely in the portal.
Right. And not to deviate so much, but man, Nebraska just continues to lose players. That program needs to be saved because they can't keep guys.
I think Frost looks like a bust, I guess.
Yeah. JD Spielman, same thing, like the left, it's like, he's the slot guy as well, Yeah. What I see with Wan'Dale Robinson is like, he's a poor version of a Naheem Hines. That's what you hope he could be. He's not as athletic. He's quick, twitchy, shifty, good hands, can line up all over the place, just not really identified as a certain position. So you're hoping he can be a space player and you'll create, targets or opportunities for him. It's just tough to envision a ceiling. And like to define this guy, like he's the next, Tariq Cohen or Naheem Hines. That's tough because a lot of that is scheme dependent, So that's probably the ceiling for him, honestly.
I mean, and to be honest, as a fantasy player, I mean, this is all kind of through that fantasy lens, right? I mean, I've never been a guy who has the Naheem Hines, the Tariq Cohens of the world. That to me, that's a good real life weapon asset to have in an offense. But for fantasy purposes, I really don't want those guys at all. And I kind of respectfully engaged in a little bit of a debate on Twitter with a guy who was, lobbying, Naheem Hines is a buy for next year. And I'm like, why, dude? Like, he had all these stats and like these splits, and I'm like, dude, when are you ever going to want to start Naheem Hines unless he's the only man standing in the backfield somehow? Otherwise, you're hoping for a touchdown or two and like 6 receptions, which I don't care what you think about JT. I still don't want Naheem Hines. So, and Tariq Cohen, never been a guy for me either. So if that's his mold, probably could consider dropping him. I actually was very curious what you saw in film. Like, could he be more? I think Devy Kane said recently this week he's what we want Kadarius Toney to be. So, I think these are all maybe these kinds of gadget guys. And the one thing that sets Chenault above these guys is he's 230 pounds or something like that.
Nice.
So he's a different looking player than these guys who are all smaller, very shifty, and maybe more that traditional low A dot, around the line scrimmage little water bug who runs around. So
and Chenault got hurt again, which is what we saw with this team. He's 6'2", which makes the difference. But if you'd have to make that transition for me to consider him, I would need to see more in terms of his route running, at least down the field. Like if you can't show me anything beyond 5 yards, I'm not that in.
No, I agree. I mean, that totally makes sense. And then I guess for us kind of guys trying to look at these guys, I mean, does the rushing do anything for you? I mean, the fact that he was like led the team in rushing as a freshman, got a lot of carries this year, although Dedrick Mills was kind of like their primary guy, but like, does that do anything for you? Or just like, well, they just don't have anybody else and kind of want to give him the ball a couple times, but it doesn't necessarily make him exciting.
I mean, it's another, feather in his cap that he maybe could get some carries at the NFL level, but it's not to me. I mean, like the best case scenario would be like, man, could he like develop into like a Deebo Samuel? Deebo Samuel was unbelievable at South Carolina. People don't like his sophomore year before he broke his leg. Deebo was amazing. I think he scored like 9 touchdowns on like 35 touches or something crazy, and then he broke his leg. And then his junior, he wasn't quite the same guy, but he was like getting back. So that's what kind of held me back from projecting him. That's like a guy that can be utilized in reverses and some routes and stuff, but like Deebo did more down the field. You know what I mean? So like, it's just so tough to say, hey, this guy is going to project into something where you'd want to draft him right now. Cause that's what this show is, that's what makes this so tough. There's other guys in this tier here, that I think have shown more to me to be a receiver and to get touches in the NFL than, Robinson.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fair. I know there's a lot of Robinson fans out there, and I think he's interesting, and that's where he is for me, like you said, right now, but this is very fluid. So next on the list, Zay Flowers, who kind of broke out this year in his second year for Boston College. Phil Jurkovec kind of injecting some life into that passing game. And he was 47% in the slot. So this is actually the first guy to show, at least on this list, that he maybe does a little of everything. He's not, only outside. He's not only slot, primary slot. He's kind of 50-50-ish. He looks like a nice little player. I mean, true sophomore breakout. You love to see that. He had 25% of the market share as a, still a teenager. I have to say I haven't like extensively watched film on Zay Flowers. This is kind of mining the stat sheets and a guy that looks interesting, but he seems to show just like quality all around skills for Boston College. So, do you have an opinion on Zay yet?
I just looked at. I've watched a little bit of him. I just looked up his size because I was curious. I liked him honestly. I mean, the little bit that I've seen of him, his size, it says it's 5'11", 178. He looks thicker.
Yeah,
His
that might
lower
not be updated.
Yeah, his lower half looks thicker than that. I mean, he looks probably like a 5'11", maybe like a 195 type of guy to me, maybe 190, which yeah, he showed me enough to have me interested.
Hmm.
Winning down the field after the reception, being on balance, showing. Now here's the other part, and I talked about this. Wanting to be tough in a crowd. He's tough. Where he'll take a hit, he'll run to kind of get in there and maybe break a tackle and kind of go for something. Get handoffs, reverses, all kind of stuff. He's shown me enough to have me interested. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised what I saw.
Yeah, maybe I'll watch this guy for you. I do have him in the back end of the top 10 here. But yeah, I think he's interesting. The only thing I have to get out of my head is I keep thinking Zay Jones, who I have
Oh,
no desire for.
oh,
But
you do you? I mean, this is going back a ways. One of my hilarious, I'd say probably my funniest moments on Twitter is when Zay Jones came out. I was very against him because he was such a manufactured
mhm,
touch guy. Like he would get like 25 targets in a game. Like, man, look at his stats. I'm like, he had 25 targets. Like it's his A dot was like 7. Like, what are we
yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
And I got an argument with his dad, who is Robert Jones, who won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys in the early 90s with Jimmy
Oh,
Johnson.
wow.
And I asked his dad where he had him ranked him on the wide receivers in the class. And,
Oh, man.
and he laughed. He thought it was funny that I asked him, but that's,
That's
a fun
amazing.
moment a long time ago. Zay
Oh, that
Jones.
is amazing. What a great story for Zay Jones. But yeah, Zay Flowers, totally different guy. But I mean, there's not that many Zays, so I just think of Zay Jones. After him, the Bama product, John Mechie, the third, I believe it is. So, had a big audition this year with Waddle going down and honestly seemed more productive before Waddle went down, kind of being that third option and getting some deep shots. And then Waddle went down, and it pretty much just became, as we know now, Devonta Smith's dream season, and didn't really funnel much to Mechie. In fact, Billingsley got involved, and so he's here because he's a Bama product, and we'll see next year. But I have concerns that I don't know, he might be a little limited, at least so far in his career. Seemed to excel a little bit when he was the third option and then got thrust into kind of a more permanent role, and he wasn't quite as impressive.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Everything that I saw, it was basically, you talk about a running back when they get a carry, and you're like, what do they get above expected during this touch? Mechie basically got what I thought any basic receiver in college football
Mhm.
would get during that. Not to say he's terrible, but to me, even like I liked what I saw to Robert Foster more coming out of Alabama than what I saw from him. And Foster had like a little splash in the NFL,
Yeah,
but
he did.
I don't see him getting to be a top 3 receiver on an NFL team, maybe top 4. And to me, that makes him fantasy irrelevant.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, that if that's true, that would be completely irrelevant. So at this point, he's on there kind of Bama, just the Bama bump, I guess. For Devy leagues, you might want to just have guys in that depth chart. Honest, to be totally honest, just kind of didn't have a lot of other guys I love, so I just was like, well, Mechie's probably worth having. I mean, um, we're talking within the class, or this would be a late pick or whatever, but a guy to keep an eye on, but not super impressive. Actually, was kind of his name was on the map before Waddle went out. Then he went out, and I think everyone's like, "Oh, it's going to be John Mechie," and he just really didn't do much. Plus a little of the dropsies, which I don't care that much about, but he didn't seem to have super solid hands either. Um, and then Khalil Shakir for Boise State was a pleasant surprise. I found kind of during bowl season, mining for my DFS lineups on Boise State weeks when they were part of the slate, and looking at this guy and being like, "Holy crap!" I mean, he's like dominating Boise State's receiving yardage and everything this year. Like, I think he broke out technically as a second-year guy with 20, barely over 20%. So he was on the map last year, and important guy in the Boise offense. And then this year, like 40%, market share, meaning more, commanding almost half the production, which you love to see, especially from a G5 team. You want really high domination there, and he did it. And he returns punts, I think. So kind of a dynamic guy. Watching his tape, not blown away with athleticism. However, he seems like a smart receiver, and he seems to make some good decisions with some nifty moves after the catch and things like that. So, have you gotten a chance to look at Shakir? I think he's kind of an interesting under the radar guy now. Maybe could bump by next year.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think he's a smart, efficient player. I mean, honestly, he's kind of like a poor David Bell. He does smart things on the field. You can trust him. He's going to get more than expected on plays. He's got decent size and thickness. He's got a good lateral ability to him where he doesn't lose as much, and he knows how to attack a defender's leverage to get more yards after the reception, which is important. You didn't use their momentum against them. They use him on carries. He gets reverses. And,
yeah, that's another thing.
Yes, I mean that's there's more to his game. Now, does he have a lot of straight line speed? No, but he still knows how to get open. So I think he'll make an NFL team. He could be wide receiver 3. Now again, could that be productive? And for fantasy, we need to see a little bit more from him. And he's a junior. He could come out. He probably won't, as you say, not being a Power 5 conference. But I was pleasantly surprised what I saw on tape. I was like, that's enough for me, like Flowers, to be interested to see what happens next year.
Yeah, and I think these guys, we're getting down to the 10th receiver in a class, and the 2021 class is so loaded that the 10th receiver is still highly fantasy relevant. I think the 2022 class, and I haven't even looked at 2023 receivers too hard yet, but we may not see these classes that are like 10, 15 guys deep where you just like love 15 guys. I mean, you fall off pretty quickly in this class, I think. But so he rounds out number 10. I've got a watch list here, but you brought up a couple guys when we were talking before the show that I think our listeners probably would maybe rather hear about than some of the guys I have, just because they're Power 5 guys. And we have a ceiling that we can dream on with, 2 guys out of Clemson, both basically missed the whole year this year, I think. Well, let's throw a third guy, which we didn't even talk about. 3 guys at Clemson: Justin Ross, Frank Ladson, and Joe Nagata. We've got pedigree out the wazoo with these guys. None of them have seen the field since like 2019. For any real contributions. So I think Ross, the latest on him is he's going to try to play again next year. I don't think his career is over. He flashed as a freshman and looked phenomenal. So what do you think about these 3 Clemson receivers? They could all potentially be in the 2022 class if they pop and decide to declare. So on the watch list for sure, but what do you like or don't like?
Yeah, good point about bringing Ross up as well. And again, I mean, injuries are the worst part about this game. I mean, if you ever cheer for injuries, you've never actually been injured yourself, and all the time and effort that they put into this to get hurt, I feel so bad for Ross. That said, I wasn't as big of a fan of him as other people were. I just didn't see the athleticism that was there. The ball skills are crazy. Like it was that. And again, when you do things in big time games, people will remember them forever.
Yeah, he had that sideline grab, and I think it was a natty
Yeah, it was awesome. And he did multiple, and they got highlighted, and he caught, was it him or Higgins caught the one, and then the Bama guy blew his Achilles and ran for a touch. I mean, there's plays that happened, but he still has he'll be an NFL player if he was healthy, you know what I mean? So he can help a team. So again, all 3 of these guys actually are almost the same size. They're all about 6'2", 6'3", 220, although I think Latson's a little bit lighter. He might be 200.
Yes.
But they're all about the same. I would say they're similar in terms of athleticism. I think Latson's got probably the most, the best speed, but they're all kind of have to build up a little bit to their speed. They have good body control. They're coached well. I mean, Clemson coaches the receivers so well. Ross probably has the most potential. And I like Nagata better than Latson, even though Latson has flashed more in college. So the injuries that they had, Ross was a neck
Yeah, that's
injury.
like vertebra thing.
Yeah,
Scary
I
stuff.
know. Yep. Nagata had an abdomen issue for most of the year, then they ended up having surgery on it. And then Latson had a foot ankle, but played, I don't know, 5
Yeah, he
games or
was like
something.
active, but still never saw any work. So I
Mhm.
don't know what was exactly happening.
Yeah, but I mean, those three, I mean, going into the year before they were injured, I mean, in this class, Nagata was my fourth, and then Latson was my fifth. And and we talked about a lot of other guys here, and there's other guys behind here. I mean, you talked about Hazelwood and et cetera. I mean, those guys are talented too. So they both have a lot of potential. They flashed in the spring game, and then now we just didn't see it. So I would not count them out at all.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And they're absolutely on a watch list at this point. I tend to, and this is where I can learn on my own too, I tend to really value production I've seen versus production I haven't seen. So it's easy to drop guys that I haven't really seen do anything at the college level. Although Ross did, I didn't know what was happening with him, so I kind of like dropped him because I was like, I don't know if he's literally going to play again. Looks like he will. So yeah, keep those Clemson guys in mind, which is pretty interesting too this year. They were not playing with the same firepower that we've seen them. Amari Rogers is okay. Cornell Powell is like a sixth-year senior or something like
Yep,
that.
that's another
So,
one. Yep.
and he looked nice, but they could have had so much more in terms of just pure football talent
Mhm.
that they didn't have. So, don't forget about those guys. And then real quick, I'll just say 4 names. You tell me if anyone pops out, especially for you. I've got on my watch list, these are all G5 guys. Jaden Blue for Temple, Dante Wright for Colorado State, Jacob Cowing for UTEP, Javian Hiley for Coastal Carolina as part of their Cinderella season. He kind of popped. I think the guy that's most exciting for me is Dante Wright for Colorado State because he has been real good now as a freshman, technically broke out and then was really good, 35% in their I don't know, 5-game season, whatever Colorado State had. So seems real interesting type player to me. Haven't watched tons of film on him, so I don't know if you have an opinion, but those 4 guys, G5 guys, anybody stand out to you?
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Wright, honestly. He's a guy that they just give him the ball in space. He doesn't like contact, kind of avoids. It's tough for me to envision him being fantasy startable, I guess, for the NFL. I just projecting there. Javion is probably the one, although he's probably the one. I mean, he's got a solid size. He's 6'2", probably 210, long limbs, confident guy. Likes to tell you when he scores. Confident type of guy. I haven't seen a ton from his game, but there of those guys, he would probably be the one that I highlight the most that might have a shot. I mean, again, he flashed, put up some good numbers. The competition a little lower, but it's still flashing, which you want to see. I just don't know how high he'll rise up in this next year.
Right. I mean, and coming from, even though Coastal is ranked and probably will start next year as ranked in terms of just buzz and publicity, but being a G5, it's going to be hard to get his NFL potential. I mean, because part of this is baked into draft capital. I mean, for us, for fantasy, you need guys who get the draft capital, they're going to get targets or get the opportunity. All that's baked into some of these lists and projections. So he might be trouble to get draft capital, but good year again. Maybe Coastal Carolina makes the playoff if we can get some G5 teams in there. Makes a name for himself. Another guy I actually didn't even have on my list, but thinking of G5 guys who might make the playoff, I think Alec Pierce is an interesting guy for Cincinnati. I don't know if you've looked at him, but I like what I saw from him, and I think he'll be back again with Ritter for one last ride. So
Yeah,
that's
Ritter's probably going to come back, as I guess. But
yeah, I know he's announced he's coming back.
yeah, even CJ Johnson, who you haven't mentioned. I mean, he's the guy that came out early.
I loved CJ Johnson before this year. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened out there.
Now, I didn't. I mean, I had him Let me look. I
Well,
had
Pure
him.
Metric said he was just a beast, but yeah, I think I listened to somebody do a film review and just said he wasn't like he wasn't an athlete, like an elite
No,
athlete. He was just boxing people out.
if I had to describe him, and this is a negative comp, he was like Nikhil Harry in college for me, which it was basically just throw it up. I'm going to get it. I don't have to worry about my routes. I mean, he's 6'2",
Mhm.
235 at East Carolina on DBs that are probably,
An AAC or whatever it is, or
you know,
USA.
so wasn't a fan. But again, you want to talk about a guy from non-power conference. He's
Yeah.
a guy to highlight or at least mention among this class.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any last guys you want to mention?
Theo at
Beast.
Oklahoma, Dominic Blaylock, um, I mean Bridges, even Oklahoma.
Yeah.
He's okay. He got suspended, drugs, I think, or something.
Mhm.
Um, and a fun guy at Texas. Jake Smith's kind of fun. He's athletic. He just hasn't really got a lot of production, but man, he's. I mean, talk about an athletic guy that's a slot guy. He could do it if Texas uses him.
Mhm. Yeah, Jake Smith would have been on my top 10 preseason, I think. But he had a weird season. I mean, so many people, like, honestly, this year of any year, if you weren't 100% on week 1, it was going to be real hard. And he
Right.
started injured. Not only short seasons, but everything is wonky. You've got virtual meetings. I mean, as a coach, I don't even know how that would just be a nightmare trying to like herd cattle through virtual game planning and stuff. So I mean, if you weren't a completely all in when the season started, I feel like it would just be harder than normal to kind of catch up and get in the swing of things. So maybe gets a pass. Certainly looked good as a freshman. I think had 6 TDs and kind of looked like he was on the way to doing something. So yeah, don't forget about Jake Smith. That's a good point too.
I mean, Makai Polk, I think he's transferring from Cal now, but
Mississippi
you know,
State.
he's, he looks pretty athletic, long. But again, a lot of these guys, like what it is they need to do a lot. I mean, some of the guys we mentioned already, they have to take a step. These guys have to take big steps
Mhm.
because they
Yeah.
haven't done enough, you know.
So I
So
think one take home, this class is very top heavy. I think, contrast that with 2019 and 2020 and what we're looking at coming down the line with 2021. This 2022 class, at least for the wide receivers, looks a little shaky after, what will probably be the rookie round 1. I mean, I think you've got 3 guys we both agree are very interesting. One very, very high ceiling, a high floor in Bell. Garrett Wilson, I don't really know. You did a good job of making me rethink him a little bit there. Um,
sorry.
no, we all need that. Traylon Burks, again, kind of that grab bag, right? I mean, jumbo athlete, ceiling you can dream on, but could be nothing, honestly, at the next level if he doesn't develop some technical stuff. And then after that, it's a whole lot of like,
Yeah.
So when you are thinking about your 2022 picks, realize that we've got a couple very nice receivers, but after that, pretty big fall off, at least at this moment. So don't maybe feel like you have to hold your 2022 picks right now. Could be a very top heavy class. I mean, the running backs seem very top heavy right now, too. Um, Quarterbacks, if I remember, we already did the show, but Howell and Rattler probably pretty exciting. Slovis jury's a little out on. Ritter's going to be involved now, and you know, after that it kind of falls off too. So I mean, I think right now 2022 is looking like first round rookie picks. You can probably get a guy you like, maybe even first half of rookie picks. I mean, like 2 quarterbacks, 2 receivers, 2 running backs. I don't know. Back end of the first round is going to start getting ugly, at least as it stands right now. So
Yeah.
it's going to
The,
be
the,
a different. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm with you. The only way it gets better is if some of these guys go back to school and it enriches this class. But if the guys, declare who we think are going to declare, yeah, this might be one of those years where you just get out early,
Mhm.
or when you're in these drafts this year, you trade your next year's first, and they're like, oh man, they give me this first, and it's cheap to get rid of it. I know it's like hold the first no matter what to right before the draft, But there are classes where it doesn't pay off. Like the Tavon Austin class wasn't great besides Hopkins. Like it was like a kind of class.
Mm.
And I think this class is getting there. If it's not going to be a top 5 pick, I think I'm out.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm with you. And this is why I wanted to do this show this offseason. So not talking about rookies, but when you play Dynasty and definitely Devy, and even in your C2C, all these guys are rostered, so whatever. But Dynasty and Devy, when you have to choose from these pools, you have to know what you got to put faces to these picks. You can't just say, like you said, you don't want to just say, oh, I never trade a first round pick. Maybe the first round sucks. Like maybe there's just nobody there. And like you said, this year you've got studs. I mean, projectable studs well into the second round and in Superflex into the third round, I think. And so this year, maybe you can trade next year's first for a second and a third, or next year's first for, I mean, I don't know what, a cheap younger guy and a second round pick this year, if you're on the clock, or I don't know, if there's a guy who's available and you want to move up, something like that. But if you don't know the 2022 class really well, you're not going to feel confident to pull that trigger and make that move. But if you're like, yeah, I really don't like this next class, I want to get the guys this year because this class is loaded, it's really important. So that's why we want to do this show. You know, it's never too early to know that next class. And like we've talked about, it is 2 years away and things will change. But as it stands right now, this is not a very impressive class. And so we can even use that to our advantage in trading and maneuvering our resources as fantasy managers. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Nick. It was truly a pleasure to hear you wax poetic about the game, talk about these details that I am not skilled enough yet to appreciate about the game. Invaluable stuff. So much gratitude for you to come on, and I'll let you. I don't know if you want to plug anything or say anything where people can find you or whatever, and then we'll get out of here.
No, I'm honored, man. Thanks for the really, really kind words. I was really excited, as I said off air, to come on the show, and yeah, we'll have to watch some film sometime. It'll be fun to just to pick each other's brains. But yeah, so I guess just where I'm at now, Dynasty Nerds, we do Film Nerds, so we'll break down guys coming into this 2021 rookie class, and that's a time where we break down a few plays and talk about the nuances so you can see it. So I'm there. And then when is this airing?
As whenever I can get it edited. So within this week for sure.
So kind of a little hidden thing is I'm going to be joining DTC's podcast again. It's something I used to be on, and no one knows that. So you guys will find that out whether this comes out before then or after then.
Here first, folks.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm friends with, JP Hurley and Izzy and Mosier. I was on there before a couple of years ago, and it was a blast. And it's like, why not? We'll just talk football. So I'm on there on Twitter @_ Nick Whalen. And then we'll see if I get back to my YouTube channel. It was fun. It just takes a lot of time, and I'm one person, but in the end, I mean, I just like talking football. If you guys have questions, just ask stuff on Twitter. And if I see something cool, if you guys see something, I like learning from you too.
Yeah, and I'll say anyone listening to this, Nick's awesome. I mean, we've interacted some, but it's not like we're like super good buddies on there. But I reached out to him on DM and asked if he wanted to come on, and he immediately said yes, and we set this up, and it's been just a great experience. So, really great guy, great interactions on Twitter, from his point of view, and so. That is our Why Wait Till Sunday. It's been a marathon, sitting at an hour and a half right now. I may try to edit it down a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it. We don't always do guests, so when we do, I like to have the interview portion and pick their brain before we get into the nuts and bolts. So thanks for listening, and look for more stuff. We're going to do tight ends, and we're going to do 2023 after we get done with these 2022 guys. So we'll keep them coming. Like and subscribe, please. We can get this thing bigger and get everybody more interested in Devy and Dynasty because it is so fun. And we will see you next time. Thanks.